Welcome, folks, to my CSC PhD information session, organized and hosted by a lot of folks at UCSD CSE, as well as folks from other institutions, which we'll get to in a second. Today, we'll be talking about PhD student life. So what is this about? Essentially, we're going to answer questions that you have about getting a PhD in computer science, because we want to help you make an informed decision about getting a PhD in computer science. It's really hard to find information about this online for a variety of reasons. Often it's not specific enough, or it's too specific. You find blog posts about specific programs, or it's just out of date, incorrect, etc. And so we have a host of panelists from various different institutions who are going to talk about getting a PhD in computer science, specifically PhD student life. And the reason we're doing this is because research shows that getting info from professors and grad students leads to better decisions for participants like yourself. So how will this work? You folks so far have submitted a ton of questions, which thank you for that. They're on Slido. So if you go to the URL and type in this event number, you can see the top questions. You can add some, and you can also vote up questions that are already there. Please feel free to upvote whichever ones you'd like us to discuss, and also add questions that may not be there already. In the short hour that we have together, we'll be answering questions in the order of popularity. And I will be also picking perhaps the less popular questions just to give some variety in the flavor of questions that are getting asked. Before we get started, we are going to do some quick introductions for our panelists. So panelists, if y'all could introduce yourselves in this order, so I don't need to call people off, that would be great. And we're going to ask for name, current institution, whether you're a professor or a PhD student or candidate, undergrad institution, and research area. So I can go first. My name is Ariana Mirian. I'm currently a PhD candidate at UC San Diego. I did my undergrad at the University of Michigan, and my research is in security and measurement and systems. So essentially, I collect large amounts of data to understand user behaviors as it pertains to security, and then figure out how we can make that better, very broadly. And I will be moderating the panel today. So hopefully after these intro slides, I will be actually speaking very little for the rest of the presentation. All right, next.
So, hey folks, my name's Audrey. I went to CU Boulder for my undergrad, and I'm at UC San Diego now as a PhD student. My research is on internet measurement and security. So basically spammers, scammers, and stalkers, and all things related to that. I try and find out more about them and stop them when applicable. Yeah, Ariana, am I missing anything? Cool. Next up.
Okay. Hi, my name is Gabrielle Beck. You can just call me Gabby. So I'm currently at Johns Hopkins, but my undergrad was also University of Michigan. My research area is theoretical and applied cryptography, which is not cartography. Cartography is something completely different that has to deal with maps. But it's basically the really mathematical side of security.
Hi, my name is Heng Yuzhao, and currently I'm a PhD candidate from UC San Diego. I did my undergrad in China, and I started my PhD in 2016. My PhD research experience includes computer architecture design for accelerating and optimizing machine learning applications, and also I'm really interested in developing the safety-aware autonomous driving systems. Thank you.
Cool. My name is James Chancholis. I go by Jim. I'm a PhD student from Georgia Tech in Atlanta. And my research area is in security and applied cryptography in edge computing infrastructure. Great to be here.
Hello, I'm Marco Carmesino. I'm currently a postdoc at Boston University. That's the thing that happens to you if you're between being a PhD candidate and maybe a professor. I did my PhD at University of California, San Diego. My research is in theoretical computer science very broadly, and recently I've been focusing on protecting privacy for machine learning. So not leaking information about individuals when you train models on their sensitive attributes like genetic data or what have you.
Hi, I'm Olivia. I am a PhD student at UC San Diego. For college, I went to U Chicago, and currently I'm studying or researching in embedded systems, specifically accelerating machine learning and FPGAs. I'm also dabbling in some embedded operating system stuff.
Excellent. Thanks, folks, for all the intros. So we're gonna start answering some questions. Skipped ahead. Panelists, because we only have at this point 40 or 53 minutes, for the questions, if essentially what you'd like to add is a rehash of what someone else has already said, like me too, totally similar, I'd ask that you refrain from saying that, just so we can get through a wide variety of questions. So if you have something new, please chime in. If not, you can put your thumbs up, add an emoji react. But yeah, we're going to try and get through quite a number of questions today. So folks, feel free to upvote questions. I'm going to take the first one to start us off. And then panelists, feel free to just jump in. So how can I tell if research is something I like?
I can start.
Yeah.
The only way that I was able to tell is by actually trying it. I think, and try it in multiple areas. So I tried like natural language processing, applied statistics, and theoretical computer science before I was able to decide, okay, I actually want to do my PhD in theoretical CS.
I'd like to add to that real fast. If you do not have the opportunity to try a whole bunch of different areas of research, I would say the defining characteristic of research is that you will be solving open-ended problems that nobody else, maybe nobody else in the entire world knows how to solve or has ever solved before. So maybe, if you have class projects that are big and kind of open-ended where you need to go from step A to step Z and figure out B, C, D, and E, all the steps in between, and you enjoy that sort of thing where you have to figure out the steps to take next, research might be for you. If you like things where you have a more directed goal, then maybe research is less up your alley.
Anyone else? If not, we can move on to the next one. So yeah, research experience and open-ended problem solving. All right, so because this is about PhD student life, I'm actually going to jump ahead to this question. Can you talk about a time when you doubted whether or not a PhD was the right path for you?
I mean, as a PhD student, it happens. This situation happens. For example, for me, sometimes I keep submitting my project and for multiple conferences, just got a lot of rejection from the reviewers. At that moment, I feel that a little bit of frustrated. So I'm thinking about it. Well, I'm suitable for pursuing a PhD degree, But when I talk with my advisor and also collaborators, just to get more confidence, self-confidence from them, and I just feel, okay, it's kind of a temporary issues. We can definitely address these challenges. Finally we can success.
I was actually going to mention a time when I actually doubted whether or not I should even start a PhD program. At the end of my senior year, I was working in a lab at U of M and speaking a lot with grad students, and I was debating whether or not I would be good enough or capable enough to do a PhD program. At the time, I received a lot of support from professors that I had interacted with and other grad students as well. And I realized that at the end of the day, PhD students are they're just also people. We are not super smart people. I mean, not that we aren't intelligent, but everybody is to some degree. Everybody is makes mistakes too. So it's if that's the reason that you're doubting entering a PhD program, it should not be a reason.
Awesome, thank you. Any other additions from panelists on when was a time that you perhaps doubted the PhD path?
I think the same thing in terms of like deciding whether or not to actually apply and do it was, it really felt like, I think I talked to like us also, like Abby said, many people, and it really is kind of sort of unanswerable. Like there is no right answer. It's just doing, I think the biggest thing that helped me was going with your gut and just shooting for the moon, kind of.
Absolutely, yeah. I will add, I know people who started a PhD and then ended up leaving for a variety of reasons. So it definitely isn't for everyone. And if your gut is telling you this isn't right for me, or there's life circumstances, that does not mean that you're a failure in any way. It just means that that path isn't right for you. There's a lot of paths to get to where you want to end up. So I'd also really like to emphasize that. So moving on to the next question, this nice broad one: how does getting a PhD compare to a bachelor's in terms of difficulty with classes, time management, and lifestyle?
Can I tackle this one? So
Yeah.
I have actually found getting a PhD is way easier than getting a bachelor's degree, because bachelor's degree, I would work 50 or 60 hours a week. I would work evenings, I would work weekends. It was just absolutely ridiculous. You've got 5 classes going on at once every single semester or quarter. PhD, you've got 2 maximum. And while those can be incredibly difficult, frustrating, and time consuming, like all classes have, at least there's only 2 of them. And once you're done with classes, which actually doesn't take very long, it's 2 or 3 years that you have to take classes when you first start your PhD. Once you're done with those, then it's basically just like an ordinary job. I tend to work 40-hour weeks unless I've got a deadline coming up, and I don't work evenings and I don't work weekends unless something really, really time pressing is going on.
Yeah, to build on that answer a little more, I think it's all centered around flexibility. In your undergrad, deadlines are hard, and they are in your in grad school too, but which deadlines are hard kind of changes. So paper deadlines or research output for, if you're going to be presenting for a funding agency or something, those are hard deadlines. But as far as classes goes, you have a little bit more flexibility there because you have all these other activities going on. And so there's flexibility in your classes, in how you spend your time, when you spend your time working on classes, and when you do just everyday tasks to live as a human. Like, when do you go to the grocery store? Well, I go on Monday afternoon because nobody else is there, and my schedule is flexible enough to do that.
Yeah, I'd like to add, in terms of lifestyle, for me, it was very different. I made a very conscious decision to treat my PhD very differently than my bachelor's, because in my bachelor's, I actually burned out to the point where I had some health problems flaring up because I have a chronic health condition. I was like, oh, that is not sustainable for 6 more years. And so I made a very conscious decision to start exercising and cook for myself and just take time to do things that weren't work. And when I reflect back on my undergrad, I feel like I was always running around. Like, I was going to the next study group, the next exam, the next class. I was in a research lab. Like, I was always running around. And I feel like with my PhD, it's been much easier to find space and time for myself. What I often tell people is that I feel like I'm like now an adult. Where in undergrad, I was just like kind of running around frantically from thing to thing. So in terms of lifestyle, it's very much what you would like it to be, but you have the space, flexibility, and time for yourself, if that's what you'd like.
Sorry, I just want to add a quick thought along those lines. So it is incredibly self-motivated, and I want to say that can also somewhat be a downside. It sort of depends on your personality, right? So some people, I think, find that they have to make conscious space for like making time for themselves, making time for like the activities that they enjoy, because it is definitely easy like to feel incredibly pressured in a PhD, and not like the same, maybe potentially not the same way as you would in an undergrad program. But you can definitely make that space, and I would encourage you, if you are going to like enter a PhD program to do that, because I actually find that you're more productive when you do give yourself time off to do the things that you enjoy.
Yeah. One last thought to that. PhD is very different than bachelor's, where I think a lot of bachelor's students have classes and assignments and exams that are super closed-ended. Working in a field that is only open-ended requires some creativity, which research shows is bolstered with rest and other types of activities. Our next question, how many schools did you apply to and how confident were you that you would be admitted? Perhaps for panelists, another factor to this question is, if you were confident or not, why? So what were the factors involved in that calculation?
I can go. I applied to 11 schools, and the way that was decided was my undergrad advisor was like, you need to apply to the top 5. I was like, okay, now I need to apply to some more reasonable or attainable institutions in my head that I thought. And the way I really decided in like confidence level was I was like fortunate enough to already have a like software engineering job lined up. So I decided like if I want to get into a top program, maybe top 20-ish, depending on whatever ranking system you want to choose. But it was just like, either I'm going to, these were like the stakes that I had, was either have like some sort of job stability or be in a program that I really would enjoy myself in. And that's how sort of the confidence level was determined.
So I applied to a couple schools, between 6 and 9, and my confidence was 0. I was like, you know what? If I don't get into a single one of these schools, I'm still going to wake up tomorrow. And at that point, I was working. I spent a couple of years in industry after my undergrad, and life would have just gone on. So I was really excited about going to grad school, but to be honest, my expectations weren't very high because I did not have any undergraduate research experience. It was only industry experience. In fact, when I was in my undergrad, I had committed to spending my life just not going back to school. And once I got into industry, I realized that was a really exciting prospect. And so that's what kind of motivated me to apply. But I was pleasantly surprised when I got the application results back. And I think that goes to show that even if your confidence level is 0, you still should apply, still spend a lot of time on the application, make sure that you present yourself in the best light and put your best foot forward, because it can really work out in your favor.
Excellent. Thanks, folks. So we're going to move on to the next question. I've lost. Oh, there it is. Okay. So this is related to lifestyle. So what is the funding situation like for CS PhD programs? And for panelists, answer this question based on your own city. So can your university scholarships, TA, RAship, cover the tuition and living costs in your city? I'd also pose another question for panelists, which is what is your primary mode of funding? So, and explain like what is TA versus RAship?
Yeah, I can answer this question. I believe most of the PhD students can get funding from either TA-ship or RAship or either fellowship from the university. I currently live in San Diego, and I think the living cost in San Diego is pretty fair. My living cost can be covered by my RAships for now.
And just as a brief primer, usually TA means teaching assistant. So you are helping with a class. RAship means research assistant. So your primary goal is to do research and you're not necessarily teaching at the same time.
So I am also at UCSD, so San Diego. And the hard numbers for me are I get paid approximately $2,400 a month, maybe $2,450. And I have not found any rent in San Diego for less than approximately $1,000 unless you're in grad housing. The grad housing situation is kind of up in the air right now. I have found that personally to be affordable with, the rent and the groceries and all of that sort of thing. But, decide based on your own situation.
Yeah, adding on to Audrey's point, I agree that it's affordable. I also have no dependents. I don't have family that I'm providing for. So if you have a dependence or extenuating circumstances, that's something to consider.
That's true. In Atlanta, Georgia, where Georgia Tech is, I have to echo the same sentiment. You're not going to be racking up a savings account, but your living expenses are covered.
I'd like to add just like one quick point. If you're in grad school as well over the summer, you can typically or well potentially get contacts with industry to do internships, and that depending upon your lifestyle and if you have dependents upon you, like you can save up some money during that time frame, but like that all depends on a variety of factors. So I wouldn't necessarily count on it, but that's still also a possible source of income.
Let's go to this one. How has getting your PhD affected your mental health? A way that I would like to reframe this question is, how have you taken care of your mental health during your PhD?
I have a friend who got his PhD at CU Boulder, who took a solid third of the year. We counted all the days that he took off to go kayaking. And I looked at him and I looked at all of the awesome stories that he had. Like his advisor had awesome stories too. His advisor once got like called out of work for a while to go rescue a bunch of people who'd gotten stranded in the Himalayas. And, you know, they were both just really outdoorsy people. And so they spent a lot of time doing vacation and stuff like that. And I looked at them and I said, wow, look at all the stories they have. Look at the great life they have. Look at how happy they are. I am going to make a decision to do some of that myself. And I think that has been great for my mental health. If you just put your foot down and say, look, the guilt is not going to bother me. I'm just not going to let it bother me. It's really difficult, but if you can pull it off, then it's great, because turns out you are your own worst enemy when it comes to taking care of your mental health. You will feel guilty for not working if that's the kind of person that you are, and that's okay. But realize that probably nobody else cares as much as you do. And so if you can kind of get your head around the fact that it's okay, you can not work evenings, you can not work weekends or whatever, then I think it's better for your mental health than having like an ordinary job or getting your bachelor's degree, which tends to be so much more high paced and you have so much less control over it.
Yeah, I think even more so it's like figuring out what works for you. I think a big part for me was figuring out like I really needed at least one day a week or every other week just for myself, like not seeing anyone, and just like taking care of my apartment, my living space, and all that kinds of thing just really made me feel better, and allowed me to focus for like the rest of the work days. And I think another thing with like work guilt is like it takes practice. Like I think I've been practicing not letting work guilt affect me for years at this point, just starting from undergrad. And it does get easier, but it does take time.
In stark contrast to Audrey and Olivia, I am definitely one of those people who doing the PhD was a super mixed bag for my mental health, because I would work constantly, just all the time, because I really love my work. That's why I was there. So I let it take up my whole life. The way that I pushed back against this, instead of doing something more responsible and reasonable, was by starting up other hobbies that were also kind of like work. So I lifted weights and I wrote games. And because this was also kind of like a creative thing, or a thing that seemed like you could make progress, it sort of hit that, I don't know, reward button for me, where it's like, okay, oh, you're accomplishing something, right? So if you're that kind of person, if you really get excited or rewarded about accomplishing stuff, what worked for me to kind of mitigate this during the PhD process and now is side stuff that is also creative or like work, but is not theoretical computer science.
Yeah, I'll also add, in addition to these various self-care and self-identification of what you need as a person and personality, also knowing what your university provides for mental health services is super important. I think the latest study I saw is like 50% of PhD students in the United States will experience depression at some point during their PhD. That's because a PhD is tough. And that's not at all to scare anyone. It's to be very realistic that these are issues that affect PhD students. And so, for example, I know UCSD has a very good mental health, it has very good mental health resources for grad students in the form of therapy, therapists, and also support groups for general support, grief, trauma, anything that you may be working through in parallel to your PhD. Just dropped my notebook. So for me, I have utilized a lot of these resources because, like lately I have been working through grief. I experienced the loss of a loved one, and having resources for that has been super helpful to also help me progress in my PhD.
To point out something that Olivia said, taking a day off and taking a day to yourself, I really like that. And I wanted to also say that if you are the kind of person who is recharged when they're around other people, maybe that's the day that you spend with friends, or if you find a subset of your cohort or your group, your PhD group, you're all going through the same things together, you can commiserate. In our current situation, that can be a little bit more difficult, but there's so many different things that you can do together with a big group of people online. You can play games, you can just meet for a little happy hour. And those are things that I didn't realize had to be as explicitly scheduled. Like you have to create a Slack channel or a group text or something. You need some mechanism to set all this stuff up, but the payoff from it can really be great because you get a whole week of productive work after you have a really fun day together with a bunch of people. Yeah.
If there are no other thoughts, we'll move on to the next question. So we'll go to the next top one, which is not super PhD student life, but still relevant to PhD students. Any advice for people deciding between starting a PhD and joining the workforce as a software engineer?
I realize I've been talking a lot, but yes, particularly good piece of advice that my undergrad advisor gave me, which was, look, you can always leave with a master's if you start a PhD. So that's a useful thing to do. You will be better off in industry for the most part if you have a master's degree than if you don't. And if you start a PhD program and then you leave with a master's, then they will pay for you to get to that point. Whereas if you just go in for a master's degree, you have to pay for it. So, if you just kind of want to try it out, there's really no reason not to. So you might as well just give it a shot.
I'd like to add to this one though, too, kind of as like a counterpoint. I mean, I agree with Audrey, like entirely, considering I went directly into a PhD program, but I also know like at least 2 or 3 people, actually more than that, who went to industry and came back to do a PhD. That is like not at all like an impossible thing. My advisor, I believe, did that himself as well. Like it's not at all out of the ordinary. So don't feel like you're closing a door if you do decide to go into industry. The one other thing I would comment on, I guess, that a PhD gives you, I mean, which is why I did one versus like becoming a software engineer, is kind of like you do sort of get the chance to basically work on like potentially really interesting problems that are not really connected to any company's bottom line. Like, I think that's something that you get out of a PhD that you can't really get anywhere else.
Yeah, I agree with Olivia, and I also want to add something. So I think the people who have this question, maybe they are worried about PhD may take a long time to finish, like for 5 years, 6 years. But my advice will be that if you are not sure if you want to pursue a PhD degree, why not to try master degree first, to apply for a graduate school and do some research in your master, let's say if you are suitable for pursuing a PhD.
Something I could add here is to try and not look too much at the salary. Like obviously, if you spend 6 years working, you're going to make a lot more money in industry than the stipend you'll get during your PhD. But the value of not just like difference in salary once you get out if you end up working, but the experience that you have in your PhD, it really can't compare to anything else out there. And so don't forget, when you're trying to weigh these costs and the value of going each direction, don't forget to factor in the fact that you're probably going to have a great time and meet a whole lot of really cool people when you're spending those 6 years or 5 years or 4 years in school.
Excellent. Thanks, folks. So I'm going to upvote a question that's focused specifically on PhD student life. What is the work-life balance like during a PhD? And I know some folks have sort of touched on this, but we'll just put this in the spotlight.
I can jump in. For me, it was pretty terrible. But that was a choice and or mistake that I made, right? Like, you can learn from me and not do that. I would track the number of focused 25-minute blocks that I spent doing work, and with all my notifications and nothing else turned off, I would get anywhere from like 3 to 6 hours of that per day. And I got kind of obsessed with just bumping that metric up and spending more and more time working. So you can choose not to do this kind of thing. And one of the best things that snapped me out of it was a writing support group at UCSD, which was this thing where they did like a 4-week workshop or something where you learned how to develop like healthier writing habits around a regular writing practice, instead of just saying, well, okay, let me maximize the hours that I work and set aside a couple of hours for like exercise and one hobby. Done. So yeah, it's easy to fall into the kind of trap that I did, but you really, really don't have to. Listen to other people. But that being said, I am really happy that I did it, and I still want a career in academia, right? So
I think this kind of goes along the point of some things that we said earlier. It's kind of like the work-life balance is sort of what you make of it. I think I had like up front at the beginning of my PhD, a very bad work-life balance where I felt like I had to work a lot, but I wasn't actually accomplishing a ton. I think recently what's turned that around for me is like actually just chronicling and writing down like what I did within a day, and seeing that like I felt like even though like I don't like if I didn't do that, I would feel like I wasn't making progress. But now I can look back and say, oh yeah, I did make progress. I totally can stop at, like I can stop at 5 if I want to. I can stop at 4:30 today if I want to. Or if you feel like you're super worn down, like it's even okay if you take like a whole day off. Like just your advisor is not like, oh, that's a whole nother question. Like, depending upon your advisor, like your advisor might be totally willing to give you time off to do whatever. And so like, yeah, it's really what you make of it, I think.
But that does bring up something which hasn't been talked about a lot yet, which is that your advisor matters. There are some advisors who will push you to work a lot harder, and there are some advisors who will be more supportive of you taking time off and work-life balance and whatnot. I mean, I mentioned my friend whose advisor took 1/3 of the year off just like he did. And so that made it possible for him. And there are also people at UCSD who I think are not so amenable to time off and things like that. So email the students of whoever you're going to work with before you accept a position and ask them what it's like working with that particular person.
Something we can't forget about though is like, for some people, it's the other way around. It's a matter of being too distracted with other exciting things going on in life and not accomplishing things. So if that's a problem that you foresee yourself having when you have these big blocks of unstructured time, maybe a more hands-on advisor will help you accomplish your goals in grad school.
All right, so we'll go to the top voted question, which is, when did you realize that you wanted to pursue a PhD?
I think for me, it was sort of, I had to make a decision at the end of college, like, what am I going to do? What was the next step? And that was sort of the forcing function for me, was figuring out, like, I had been doing research for like a little over a year at that point in college. And then I had also or I had like a software engineering internship lined up, and I had to like figure out which path do I want to take. And I think having both experiences was very helpful, so I could decide. What really helped me was trying to envisage what my day-to-day life, or try to live what my day-to-day life would be like if I were like doing research full-time versus if I were being a software engineer full-time. So then for me, it was really at the end of my software engineering internship when I realized maybe I'm not actually that interested in like these software engineering problems. I don't really want to just do all the company's plumbing and help them make money. And that was sort of, and that's when I realized I needed to sign up for the GRE, and that's how I made that decision.
Yeah, for me, I really liked research. I was fortunate enough to work in a lab in my undergrad, and so I realized I liked the open-ended problems, and I was really fascinated by it. But when I talked to a bunch of companies that were doing security research, a lot of them were large corporations. The answer I got was essentially, you need more education to be able to do research on these teams, either a master's, but preferably a PhD. And so for me, the equation was, well, I can apply to these PhD programs, and worst case, if I don't like it, I will leave with a master's degree that has been paid for, and then I will be more qualified for these research roles at these corporations. And 5 years later, I'm still here, and I'm like trying to figure out what to do post PhD. So, because this was kind of touched on and does affect PhD student life, a major obstacle while deciding whether to get a PhD seems to be the fear of getting stuck with a bad advisor. How does one avoid that in a foolproof manner? So I don't know about foolproof, but advice from our panelists.
So I can jump in here. I don't want to say anything that's like super specific to my university, but at the very least, we have a method of like trying to get students out of that situation, which is basically like there's a requirement before you complete your PhD that you have to work on a project with an advisor that's different from your current advisor. And so the idea there is like by working with an advisor that's not your advisor, you get a feel for like potentially multiple different advisor styles. And if you need to switch over, you can. So like I mean, the one thing that I guess I would that I would advise is basically like, if you feel yourself getting into that position with one advisor, like don't try and feel like you need to stick it out or something. Like at that point in time, like try to take initiative and start like reaching outside of that person, talking with other people, seeing what problems they're working on. It's not impossible to switch advisors, even if you are like 2 or 3 years in. I met one student once who had switched even that late.
Of advice along these lines, on visit days, if you are accepted to a PhD program, you will show up to the school. You will get to talk to people, email people. They're interested in getting you to come there. And also, they will be brutally honest about their programs and professors, or at least I was. They have really nothing to lose. So the best advice I can give for this is make sure that there's at least a couple of professors that you feel like you could plausibly work with at the school you want to go to. So maybe if something goes wrong with the first person you work with, if you're not compatible for whatever reason, you have an option, and ask the grad students there, do professors share students in a sense? Do they work with multiple students? Because that more collaborative culture gives you some kind of insurance to the extent possible against things going south with your first advisor for whatever reason.
And even before you arrive, I do really want to stress the first thing that Marco said and that I mentioned earlier. Talk to the students. Even before you have accepted an offer, talk to the students of your advisor and get the lowdown on what life is like working with them.
I think another helpful thing too is like knowing like what kind of person you are as a worker, as a researcher, and seeing how does your personality type, your work style fit with other work styles and other personality types. And that was a major or that was something that was at the front of my mind when I was talking to all these professors during visit days, was like, would I mesh well with them? And that helped me a lot.
Go with the next top-rated question, which is how did you find the track and research goals that make you want to pursue a PhD degree for 5 years or even more?
So my advisor, Jeff, likes to say that only 50% of people come into a PhD program knowing what they want to study. And of that 50%, approximately 90% switch what they're doing at some point during their PhD. So I think trial and error is a completely reasonable way to do this. You arrive at a PhD program and you think that you want to do systems engineering, and then you find out that security is pretty cool. And then you find out there's this thing you never even heard of. It's called internet measurement and it's dope. So, you read papers, you hear talks by interesting people. Just like as you go through the process, you figure out things that are interesting to you. You take classes, you talk to different professors. And if you try something and you decide that you don't like it, like I spent 2 summer internships working on low-level networking research before deciding that the reason I wanted to do low-level networking research was because I wanted to prove to myself I was smart enough to do it, and I didn't actually enjoy it very much. So, try some things. If you try something and you don't like it, it's not the end of the world. Switch to something else.
Yeah, that was a very great answer that encompassed a lot. I'll also add that some programs have rotations where the first year of your PhD, every semester, every quarter, you're actually required to work with a different person, specifically for this reason. So when you're looking at programs, applying to programs, if you're not sure, or you're like, oh, I'm interested in machine learning, but also hardcore like embedded systems, it might be worth looking at programs that have these rotations so that you can work with different people and it's already built into the system. This isn't anything about PhD student life, but it's a fun question. So what would you have done if you didn't decide on pursuing the PhD path? So I guess what was everyone's backup plan if they had one?
I can start. So I was working at the time when I was applying, and I was working for a small company building embedded devices, and I knew that I wanted to try something new. I was enjoying what I was doing, but I had spent some time at the company and kind of explored a little bit, and I wanted to broaden my horizons. And I knew that I could do that in 2 ways. I could either go to grad school, master's or PhD, or find a new job. And so for me, if all those applications came back as rejections, I would have ended up looking for another job, and who knows where I would be today. But I think we're very fortunate to be in a field where there's a whole lot of different options out there for you if you have your undergrad in CS or engineering. And so there's a lot of options and a lot of fun opportunities out there.
My backup plan from before I started the PhD is the same as my backup plan if I don't end up getting a professor position. I'm going to write weird improvisational tabletop role-playing games. Turns out a lot of the math that goes into game design and pieces of theoretical computer science is like fun game theory. It's same math for different stuff. So that's what I would do if I didn't do my PhD.
You should consider that as a non-backup plan, as a quick aside. Let's jump around a bit. So what is your favorite experience in pursuing or receiving your PhD? And for panelists who are willing to answer the opposite question, what has been your least favorite experience in pursuing or receiving your PhD?
I guess this isn't like one favorite experience, but one of my most one of the experiences that I like the most is like being able to come up with like reasonable ideas. So I'm at that point in my PhD where now I feel like I'm actually able to at least like start generating like interesting constructions of cryptographic primitives myself. Like, whereas before, like I still rely on my advisor heavily. I'm like halfway through my PhD, but now I feel like whenever I come up with those constructions, like even if they break down entirely and completely, and I can like figure out like exactly where a security proof won't go through, like it's still like seeing myself progress is one of my like favorite experiences, I guess.
Yeah, I would like to add some points. My favorite experience in pursuing a PhD is that I can always work on opening questions, address any potential challenges in our areas. Also, we can work collaboratively with smart people, lab mates. Most important is we have to present our outcome and ideas to others and collect their feedback and suggestions to improve our projects.
Okay, I guess to answer the other question, which my least favorite experience so far has been realizing that there are still freeloaders in grad school and you have to deal with them. And like learning how to manage and deal with all sorts of people, because people are people and people come in all shapes and are all of all sorts, and learning how you fit with other people and how you can work together has been, from that least favorite experience, been the most valuable experience in terms of like, at least so far in my life, learning how life is sort of, or how people in life operate, and figuring out how I can deal with that has been a really valuable lesson.
Yeah, one of my least favorite experiences is that often sometimes with research, progress can be slow. And I have bolstered that through techniques I think others have already mentioned, like keeping a daily journal so I can go back and be like, oh, I did do things this week, even if it doesn't feel like it. And also having hobbies where accomplishments are much quicker, like exercise hobbies where I'm like, oh, I met this new goal, which gives me that sense of accomplishment that I may not always be getting every week from my research. But my favorite experience is that as a PhD student, your job is to learn, and you still have deliverables, like you have research papers, you have to maintain systems, but your job is to learn. That's great. It's super fun. I love getting paid to just learn about the world and answer these unsolved questions.
Conversely, I can give a least favorite experience too. As a PhD student, it's your job to learn, and it turns out that some of that learning is required coursework that has nothing to do with your research. And this drove me wild. Very difficult to deal with, least favorite experience in grad school because my research was so exciting.
Quick add, I don't think this is the answer you were looking for, but honestly, my favorite grad school experience is UCSD has holiday parties they throw in CSE at the end of the year, where all of us get together and we make really ridiculously silly skits and we make fools of ourselves on camera, and everybody has a fantastic time. And then we get together and we have a potluck and we eat a boatload of food, and then we all go in and we show everybody all of our skits and everything. And we make music videos where we make fun of academic life, and we make fun of the faculty, we make fun of ourselves and everything like that. Hands down, best grad school experience.
Excellent. Still super valid answer. So I think we only have a few minutes left. So the last question I think is the most fitting. Is grad school fun, and why?
So have you ever asked someone a question and you weren't sure what kind of answer you were going to get, and the first thing that they respond with is, okay, so, and then they just launch into it. That is like the most fun thing that you can do. And it happens all over. It can happen at a conference. It can happen when you're just casually out to lunch. It can happen at the bar. But I think some of the most fun times that I've had have been just asking another PhD student about some like esoteric topic, that like rock climbing or something that I think or something that just comes up in conversation, and learning about somebody's whole life experience, or it's something that they have a lot of knowledge in. That's probably one of the most fun things I think I enjoy in grad school.
So yes, yes, grad school is fun. I like to tell people that going to get a PhD was the best decision I ever made. And that's personal to me. Your mileage may vary, but that's how I feel about it. I'm really, really glad that I'm here.
I feel like this is, for me, something that goes like, kind of like either like, yes, grad school is fun sometimes, and then sometimes it's not so much fun. It's like kind of like this roller coaster that just goes up and down. Like sometimes you can be on like a really big high, and then other times you hit like some lows. And I don't want to me too this essentially, but like I think Jim mentioned, basically like one of the best things about grad school is meeting people who are really passionate about what they do, like whatever topics that they are interested in. And you have some really cool opportunities as a grad student to go to conferences that are potentially like, thousands of miles from where you regularly do your work, and hear all of the interesting, cool things that other people are working on, and then have them potentially like work off of your ideas and stuff too. Like that's super cool as well. Like doing research and having other people want to build on top of it. Like it's an amazing feeling.
I can also say I've only ever attended online grad school. I have not experienced in-person grad school. And online grad school has already been pretty fun, so I'm very, very excited to see what in-person grad school will be like. And it sounds like it'll be even more fun.
All right, excellent. So we're reaching 1:30, and instead of starting a new question and running up against the clock, I'm going to actually end it here. So I want to thank everyone for joining this panel. I want to thank our panelists for their time and honest answers, which, this panel would not have happened without them. I'd also like to a quick shout out to the organizers of this panel, in particular Steve Swanson and a few other faculty members and grad students who took the initiative to start an info session, and now it's multiplied into many different info sessions. So for both the panelists and the participants, we will have a post-panel survey because this is an experiment. We're trying to make it better. We want to improve. We want to keep this going and make it as productive for the folks who are in the Zoom call. So you will get a survey about this panel, and if you could please fill it out honestly, that would be excellent and give us some feedback as to how to improve moving forward. But with that, I want to say again, thank you so much to everyone, and happy Tuesday. I hope everyone has a productive and happy week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.